we're back again, back to back, two shows in a row, right here on
Yes,
Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. Yes. Woo. We're getting it on. We're getting it on. Tonight,
yes.
guest, my good friend, the Texas Representative Joe Deshotel will be joining us in about 60 minutes. So, okay, Francis, what you think about the last show?
You know what? It was interesting. It was good to
Yeah.
see Mr. Getz give his POV. I mean, surface level nonetheless, but you know.
Yeah, well, we know. I would have liked to dive deeper in that deal.
Yeah.
So that didn't happen, and something happened on the comment board. I got a message from Ladonna saying a lot of folks weren't able to comment. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of comments here on the show. So with that
Yeah.
said, let's. I think we went over the PSAs from the last show, but
We did.
we have another set of guests and viewers now, so we're gonna brush over those uh, those PSAs. Folks to remember about the Texas rent relief program is available, and it's plenty of money for the Jefferson County. And they allocated $60 million of money for rentals, and the landlord. So if you are needing
And
to rent pay
utilities.
and utilities, yes, I'm sorry, yes,
Uh-huh.
and utility up to 15 months, up to 15 months. So that's going to be great for those who are as having trouble, lost jobs from COVID, had lost in pay with COVID. Your pay was shortened because of COVID. These things will help you out, and those who are not able to pay the rent or have been has a eviction notice, please go to the website or you can call. And the website is www.texasrentrelease.com or call 1-833-989-7368. Also, let's see here, we have the funeral, COVID-19 funeral assistance as well by going to
Mm-hmm.
FEMA. That's FEMA.gov. Anyone that had a family member to that lost their lives from COVID-19, and the government is willing to pay up to $7,000 of your expenses. That's from January the 20th to 2021. So that
Mm-hmm.
is a great benefit for those who are needing um, um, assistance on their rent. So, Francis,
Knowledge is Power Podcast Live is a platform to share important information by educating Southeast Texas African American communities with valuable information on health, education, finances, politics, and business. We thrive in keeping our fingers on the pulse here at Knowledge is Power, and we intend to do so tonight.
and you can also find us on Knowledge of Power Podcast on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Apple, iTunes, and Google Play. And right now, I want to give a shout out to Esther Ingens. Good evening, Jean. Let's see, who is that? Yeah, hey, Jean. Jean Smith saying she's watching, and of course, my good guy Terry. I don't know, Terry Miles wasn't able to get in. I left a link on the show on the comment board. So when you, those who like to ask questions, you can always link into the show and you'll be on the show and ask the questions personally. Hello, Fran. Fran is joining us as well with a big shout out. And we shout out to everybody else that hasn't come in. I'll just say you're there with us. Drop us a comment. We love to hear from you because we want to know and we want you to know all the important information that we have. Our next guest is our Texas Representative, Joe Deshotel. Joe is going to give us an in-depth and information about local propositions and local issues that we need to know about, the benefits, and also from the state and some of the bills he has written and presented. And we got time. We're going to ask those questions to Joe as well. Joe's going to give us some more important information. So within, I say, let's see, 30 seconds, we'll be back with Joe Deshotel. Knowledge is Power Podcast Live with your host, Tony Redfro, and my co-hosts, LaDonna Sherwood and Francis Larkins.
Knowledge is Power Podcast Live starts now.
Hello, Joe.
Hello. How are you all doing?
Our state representative, Joe Deshotel, is with us. Joe was one of my first few guests last year at this time, during the beginning of coronavirus. You remember that, Joe?
Oh, yeah. That was the topic of the day, the coronavirus.
That's right.
We've learned a lot about it since then.
Yes, we was in a lockdown. That's right. Yes. We were locked up and locked down.
Oh, yes.
But we need to. we had back-to-back shows. We had the Mike Guest show, Mike Guest on our podcast at 7:00, and now we have Joe Deshotel, who's with us, our state representative. Joe, I know you've been watching the show. How you enjoying it?
Yeah, I watched part of the last the show with Mike Getz, and what you do for the community in the area is very important. Just getting information out. Information is power. There's no question about that.
Yes, Francis, are you with? Not Francis, but LaDonna, you here with us now?
I am. I'm trying to fix something. Give me 1 second.
Okay. And I'm going to give a shout out to Robert Dawkins. He's here with us. Hey, Robert, how are you, man? Good to hear you. Good to have you here with us. Joe, tell us a little bit what's going on in the state. And let's talk local first. What's going on here local that we need to know, the community need to know?
Well, I'm in Austin. I've been here since we were sworn in January. Things are just starting to move under the Texas Constitution. The first 60 days of the legislative session, we're not allowed to hear bills unless they're emergency items by the governor. So we're just now getting into actually having committee meetings. So this is probably the 4th week of committee meetings. I chair Committee Land Resource Management, which has to do with all issues dealing with eminent domain, zoning, extraterritorial jurisdiction of cities, billboard signs that can be put on property, what the powers of a city outside of its jurisdiction, all the land that the state of Texas owns, the management of our beaches. It's a wide jurisdiction committee that I chaired that committee several years ago, and chairing it again now. And we have a huge issue. Doesn't affect Southeast Texas, at least District 22, a whole lot, but it does affect Texas a lot. It has to do with the eminent domain powers of pipelines, utility companies, transmission lines, going across people's property and how they deal with those individual landowners if they need to run a pipeline through your land, types of hearings, you notice you get, how you determine the value of your property. It gets to be really emotional to people who's affected by it. We take it for granted when we go to the service station or we flip a switch, but that power or that energy has to go through private property to get to you. And sometimes those individuals don't want that going through their property, or they want a fair market value for the cost of going through over under their property. And sometimes it destroys their property or it cuts it in half, and they can't get to a piece of their land that they used to farm for 100 years. So things we don't always think about, but those are the kind of things this committee deals with on a daily basis.
Ladies?
My phone is giving me a little bit of problems. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
I can hear you, but I can continue talking about some of the things that we're working on. I have a hearing in the morning. One of the bills that I filed has to do with what they call 313 agreements. I filed 2 bills. One, the chair hasn't set. 313 agreement with school districts is an economic development tool that school districts use, and they can work with industry or work with manufacturers to get dollars to the school in exchange for uh, giving a 313 agreement to an industrial project, and in exchange, that industrial project makes certain promises that it's going to hire a certain number of people, create certain number of jobs, and do those kind of things. And so the school district can get the replacement tax dollars by giving a tax abatement to that particular industry. I had a bill that's been filed that is not has not been set by the chairman. Kind of put a little more teeth in those 313 agreements and require them to do what they say they're going to do. So we put an audit in there, maybe by the comptroller's office every year. If they're going to get a tax abatement over a 10-year period, a certain percentage each year, I would like to see them live up to their promises and have an audit done that year. And if they do 100% of what they said they were going to do, they get 100% of the abatement that was promised. If they do half, they get half. I mean, that's a pretty aggressive bill, and right now it's kind of sitting in the Ways and Means Committee, which handles all tax issues. That's a tax bill. So I don't know that it's going to ever get a hearing, but I'm working on that particular piece of legislation.
Well, tell me a little bit about your HB 1348 relating to the charter schools.
1348. Some cities. Okay, let's back up. Charter
Mhm.
schools were set up by the Texas legislature a number of years ago in hopes that it could pick up. I don't know if that's my feedback. I don't think so. In
That's
hopes
what it
that it
is.
can pick up or help independent schools failing in certain inner city schools, and the kids were consistently failing. It allowed charter schools to be set up where you get a charter from the state, you set up a school. The state of Texas was funded based on the school population of students, and so it is a public school. It's just not an independent school district with a school board elected by the citizens. It's a board of directors, usually a nonprofit corporation board of directors that sets up the charter school. What was happening, some cities in Texas were zoning where, okay, if you wanted to add, if BISD wanted to add another elementary school to the school district, they simply petition the city and basically they get to buy the land and build a school. What some cities were doing, if a charter school wanted to open, they were saying, well, you have to do this, you have to do that. They're putting up roadblocks to prevent the charter school from being able to build that school or to move in that required a certain number of parking spots and different authorities that the city had. They were putting on onerous on these charter schools. Basically, that bill that you referred to simply said you treat all schools the same, whether it's an independent school district, a charter school, whatever. All rules apply equally because they're state-sanctioned schools.
Well, Joe, what can we expect locally around here with the new
Uh,
funding?
there are a couple of charter schools in Beaumont and Port Arthur. I know Toccoa in Port Arthur has done some really wonderful things. Those kids have had some experiences that they never would have had. They've got to talk to the first lady. They've got to have Zoom calls with people they would not have otherwise had those opportunities. And it's pretty much a one-on-one type of education, smaller classrooms, more personal learning experiences. I know that Harmony School is in Beaumont, and I haven't visited them in a while, but they were getting good reviews as far as what their graduation rates and the percentage of kids passing, the STARS test and things of that. Because some of these schools are much smaller, and you have a student-teacher ratio that's much smaller, which is always good. Now, we were affected by COVID this past school year. Some charter schools went back earlier than some of the public schools who weren't allowed to go back. But all charter schools aren't success stories. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you there have been some people who have abused the system, thought they could get a charter school to make money, really wasn't educating the kids. Then there are other charter schools that have turned kids' lives around. And so some charter schools who emphasize or only take dropout students, kids who have dropped out, don't have a GED. They target those schools and get them graduated and into college or some trade.
Well, let's talk about redistricting. It's time for the redistricting.
Right.
To take
Redistricting
place.
comes around. Normally,
Every-
redistricting comes every 10 years after the census. One of
Mhm.
the purposes, or the primary purpose of the census, is to count people. And the reason you do that is so there's something in the Constitution called one man and one vote, meaning that your congressional districts, or you take your House of Representative districts, or your ward districts in your city council, all those districts, wards, whatever you want to call them, precincts in the county level, should, under the law, contain the same number of people. So you have to count the people first to know how many people you have. And then doing redistricting, what they do is take the state of Texas total population, divided as far as the House of Representatives, by 150. And that gives us maybe 200,000 people. Just use that as an example. So District 22 has the boundary lines of District 22 has to capture 200,000 people. The boundary line of District 1, District 150, they all should, within a 5% variance, should have the same number of people, so that when I vote, I'm voting for 200,000 people, and Jim next door is not voting for only 50 people, which would give those 50 people a greater voice. So the purpose of the redistricting is, as populations shift around the state, is to move the lines around to capture that. However, that's been really politicized, and what has happened recently, as the Republicans have been in charge, and I don't say there would be any difference if the Democrats were in charge, but in the last 20 years, the Republicans, since 2003, 2001, the Republicans took over the House of Representatives in 2003 in Texas, and the Senate. And ever since then, they have redistricting. When redistricting comes around, they draw lines that create stronger Republican districts and weaker Democratic districts. And what they do is something called packing districts. They would draw a line around, say, capture as many African Americans, go all through the neighborhoods, down streets, and try to put all the African Americans, all the Hispanics in one district, so that we can't affect the election in other parts of the state. So
Right.
District 22 has it's about 65-70% Democrat, and it's over 50% African American. Now, had those African American people been in the neighboring districts, we could possibly win another seat. But when you pack all of the similar thinking people into one area, you kind of prevent the other party from being affected by that. So as we face redistricting again, and as a result of the Voting Rights Act being cut back by the Supreme Court a few years ago, that there were some safeguards in there. We certainly expect that we would not increase the 17 African Americans in the Texas House of Representatives. Probably would not increase, because they will keep the lines, and they're the majority. They vote for in the House, and then it goes to the Senate. Those lines are going to only strengthen the current Republican districts. And by strengthening them, that means those that were considered swing districts this past election. A swing district is a district that could pretty much go either way, depending on voter turnout, maybe 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. Well, they won some very close races, some very close 50-50 races that they won. you can be assured that they're going to go in those districts and move that from 50% to close to 55 or 60% Republican. And those will no longer be swing districts. And we're going to have to wait years before population shifts enough to affect those changes. That's why it was so critical this past election cycle, and the Democrats raised so much money, but they did, in my opinion, did not spend it wisely and did not do good campaigning to take over the House of Representatives. They needed to pick up 9 seats. They lost 1 seat and picked up 1 seat, so they stayed in the same position that they are now. I think 69 to 85, something, 69 to 86 Democrats to Republicans. So we're in the minority. In the Senate, we're in the minority, and of course, we have a Republican governor. So Texas is susceptible to redistricting that's going to only strengthen the position of the Republican House. Now, we not only draw the lines for the Texas House of Representatives, the Texas Senate, we draw the lines for the United States Congress. So the 36 congressmen in Texas, and you can be assured that the Republican congressmen are going to have their districts solid so that they cannot be defeated without a record type of turnout in the next election, which they run just like we do. They run every 2 years. And of course, redistricting doesn't really affect the senators, the United States senators, because United States senators run statewide. Everybody in the state gets to vote for each senator, just like they do for the governor or other statewide elected officials. But it definitely affects the U.S. Congress, and so we have election coming up 2 years from now. Next March will be a primary, and then we're going to face even stronger, probably Republican party.
Now, we had a strong showing in the last election and the election before that we made progress as Democrats. When will the redistricting is drawn and when is effective, when it starts?
Well, we don't have the numbers yet for the census numbers on it. We don't expect them to July or August. So pretty sure that we're going to be called back to Austin once the real true numbers come in. And then that will not be effective. Well, it could possibly be effective next election cycle in 2022 election for the 2023 House of Representatives and the 2023 Texas legislature. But it also could be thrown in the court and then not be in effect by then. So you can be assured that there are going to be tons of lawsuits filed. And that's another reason that these elections have such consequences, because the president appoints the federal district judges, and the federal district judges are the ones who try the cases on the redistricting, not the state judges. So it's going to be a federal judge, probably one that's appointed by Trump, that's going to be looking over the Texas plan and kind of tells you what you think might happen to that Texas plan that the Republicans draw if they pull a Republican judge.
So that's actually nothing we can do about it. It's actually nothing we can do about it.
Only thing that we can do about any of this is vote, is turn out in record numbers. We never vote. We never have voted our power. We never have voted our numbers. If we have, we would not be sitting here talking about these issues. There'd be other issues, I imagine, but we'd certainly be in control of the Texas House of Representatives and the U.S. Congress much stronger than we are, if we only would exercise our rights to vote.
Well, will we be just like in Georgia? We are to be aware of the anti-voting legislation that the state might try to propose.
The exact same thing that's going on in Georgia, those exact same bills are filed in Texas. Wow. We will be hearing them in the next couple of weeks through the election committee. And the bills that do away with souls to the polls, do away with some of the early voting, some of the drop boxes, cut those, all those same antics that we hear about in Georgia, are there are bills that mirror that all over the country in all these states, particularly in these swing states where Democrats won, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan. All those House of Representatives are controlled by Republicans, are doing the exact same thing that just happened in Georgia.
And we got to stop that with
Yeah,
lawsuits.
we don't have the numbers now, but we can stop it. I mean, it's like, all right. I mean, maybe I look at it a little different. I know that we have issues, economic issues that we deal with, some of it, our jobs and other responsibilities. But these laws, if I can articulate, that we're talking about affects every voter. So if the Republicans can win, we should be able to win. Our attitude, I wish, would be, okay, you're telling me I can't vote on Sunday anymore? Well, I'll show you. I'll vote on Saturday, and I'll bring two friends who I wouldn't have called otherwise, and I'm going to bring them, and they're going to vote too. Because we have the right to do that. We have the right to vote.
Right.
So they're saying, okay, souls to the polls is a big thing. We have hundreds of people march. That they're not saying black people can't vote. You got to, but if they can be elected, if their people can go and vote on Saturday or go and vote on Sunday, I mean on Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we need to show them that we can do that too. The law says you have to be given 2 hours of some period of time to go vote. The polls are open before and after work. So we have to make voting a higher priority than we have made voting, because we can still win. We can still win these seats because the numbers are there. And we just need to show them, okay, you saying nobody can bring me water in line, I bring my own water. When I go to a picnic, I bring water. So I bring my own bottle of water. I bring my own sandwich. I show you're not going to keep me from voting by passing some bill that says I can't go from church to the polls and vote. And it means I'm not going to vote anymore. No, we can't let them do that to us.
Yeah. Well, I lost my two co-hosts for the evening. I guess they passed their bedtime, I guess. But so I have some questions here. I have some help now. I got some more help on the comment board. So I'm going to go to Brenda Davis. She's going to have quite a few of them are going to help me ask you a few questions. They want to know about what's going on in the state. How about that? And Brenda Davis is asking, hey, Joe, I love the work you and Jasmine Crockett are doing, especially with the introduction of the Texas HB 455. I agree. Everyone should be given equal opportunity for employment.
Oh, that's a bill that I wrote, and it came out of committee. I'm hoping it's sitting in what's called the Calendars Committee now, and it's one of the early bills to make it that far. So if I can get it out of the calendars onto the floor, and I have some bipartisan support. Jasmine is one of what's called the joint authors, so she's the named author on the bill. Have a very conservative Republican, Briscoe Kane, who is the chair of the Elections Committee, which is doing all the stuff we criticize him. But he liked my bill. He signed on as the #1 joint author. So it's always good to try to have Republicans named on your bill, particularly conservative Republicans. And what that bill does is called it's called ban the box, is what is known as throughout the when we talk about it around the legislature. And the box is talking about is on the employment application. Many times on the very front page, there's a box you check asking if you ever been arrested or convicted of a felony or misdemeanor. If you check that box, then many times your application is just discarded. Because if you're a human resource person and you got 20 applications, you got to hire one clerk. And you see that, well, you got 19 more to look at, so you just throw it aside. You don't get it. That might be your best employee. That might be the best person for the job, but you don't get to know that person. You get to know nothing about them because in your mind, oh, I don't need to deal with anybody that's been arrested or convicted. So all my bill simply says is that that has to be taken off the application. If you call me in for an interview, you have the right to ask me, okay, I saw your resume, I see your experience, you worked here, you did this exact same thing for 10 years at this company, you got promoted twice, you look like a great employee. By the way, have you ever been arrested or convicted? Then if they say, yes, I had a check case 10 years ago, 7 years ago, they say, well, yeah, so did I, and just start talking and you end up getting a job. But if you have to check that before they got to know you personally, know something about your character, something about your ability, something about your family, they don't get to know any of that because you check that box and they discard it. And it's just sort of human nature. You just go on because you're in a hurry. You go on to somebody that doesn't have that box checked, and you might have just thrown away your best employee. So 455 says employer has is the absolute right to ask you that question. It's just not on the initial application until they find something out about you, call you in, and they can not hire you based on your answer. There are some exceptions. If the job you're applying for requires a background check, well, then they can have that on there. So if you want to be a bank teller, and the federal statute says you have to have a criminal background check, and if you have an offense on your background, you cannot be hired. Well, then it doesn't even make sense to call you in because they can't hire you anyway. You can leave that box on the application, but that's the only exception.
Good question, Brenda. Let's go to Terry Roy. Terry Roy is asking, will FEMA raise or lower the damage amount from
Catastrophic.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Terry. I mean, people don't always. FEMA is the. I don't know what FEMA is going to do. I don't interact with FEMA. I have no authority or jurisdiction. They're a federal agency that that Congressman Weber deals with on a regular basis. What we do when we get questions of federal jurisdiction, we work with a congressional office. One of the Congress people that I know, we'll call and we'll work with the constituent to try to get something resolved, whether it be a passport issue, a FEMA issue, or any of the federal jurisdiction type issues. But I really don't know what FEMA is going to do in regards to the COVID issue.
Well, Joe, is there anything you'd like to share with us that we may have missed? Yeah, that we may have missed to ask.
Well, I mean, we thought this session would have been kind of a quiet session, but what happened was a few weeks ago we had the freeze. It changed the whole character of it. Now we've been dealing with utilities. We've been dealing with electricity. Area District 22, the district that I represent, the district that you live in or you're in now, is not in what's called ERCOT, which you probably heard a lot about ERCOT and the PUC and the news. We're in a different service area. Entergy is our electric provider. We're not in competition, so we're outside of ERCOT, and we did experience some rolling blackouts and things of this nature. But those people who were in ERCOT, it was catastrophic for many of them. Some of them went 4 or 5 days with no power in the middle of the freeze and had no electricity. People died. 57 people died in that freeze. So we've had extensive hearings on that, and we're going to be requiring certain things of the generation people who generate the power. We're going to be requiring things of the pipeline people, the natural gas suppliers. We require backup generation for those pumps that keep the pressure up in the gas lines to the generation facilities. We require weatherization. There's a lot of things that we're working on, and we're also working on to make sure that the cost is not passed on to the ratepayers of the increased cost of power that went from 9 cent, 10 cent a kilowatt hour to $9,000 a kilowatt hour during 36-hour period during this issue. So it's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of competing interests. There's a lot of finger pointing, and we've been spending a lot of times in State Affairs Committee trying to work through that issue and try to prevent this from ever happening again. But that is something that's been taking a lot of our time and a lot of my time being on the State Affairs Committee. And we're going to be voting on our first set of bills coming to the floor on Tuesday. And I have a bill in that mix. It's 5 or 6 bills, and I have one of the bills that's designated as a priority bill by the Speaker, House Bill 17, which has caused controversy that I didn't even expect because it never crossed my mind. But it's just interesting how people can look at something and see something totally different than what you see. The bill I have, and I don't know what type of energy you use, it's anybody that's watching use, but I know I like to cook on natural gas, and I like to heat with gas and a gas hot water heater because it's more cost effective. Well, and during this freeze, I have friends who lived in Houston who went these days without power. The only way they stayed warm had gas fireplaces in their homes and were able to keep the home warm with gas stoves. But in any events, because of, I guess, some long-range plans some of the more progressive cities are making, they have plans to ban new developments. If you're going to put in a new subdivision of 500 homes, 100 homes, or 50 homes, they would ban the use of natural gas and force you to have an all-electric home. And House Bill 17 just basically says that they can't do that. They can give incentives to use electricity. They give incentives, rebates if you use electric appliance, but they can't tell you that you can't use natural gas if that's what you want to heat with or cook with. But it did. I found out that it's called a fracking bill. I was promoting fracking. That never crossed. I never heard of any of that. I was just thinking, hey, if people should have a right if they choose the source of energy that they want to use in their homes, but it has morphed into something that was certainly not my intent, and it is on the House floor. So I have an amendment to the bill, working with the Sierra Club to clarify that the cities can still offer incentives for clean energy, rebates and different things like that in education programs, but it just won't ban a subdivision from having natural gas. And in the generator, for instance, the house, my house, the time the power did go off, the automatic generator was able to come on, and it runs on natural gas. And had this been in a new subdivision without gas, it just wouldn't be available. So, and the electricity that they're saying you must use is made by burning natural gas at the electric plant to make the electricity that they want to force you to use. So, I understand the politics of it. I just know that was not my intent.
Well, Joe, tell me, what about your bill that you presented to about the horse racing or gambling in this area? And
not a horse race. I didn't have a horse racing bill. There is
you had the gambling.
There is
yes.
a horse. Yeah, I had a casino gambling bill that's pending in the licensing committee. There's a competing gambling bill that's carried by state representative. I can't think of who has that gambling bill right now. State Representative Kemple, and it's the one that's backed by the Las Vegas casinos, and it does not include Pleasure Island or Jefferson County, which the bill I had included a casino on Pleasure Island. It was described. You can't really name it, but you can do what's called you can bracket put bracket and it says certain population bordering the Gulf of Mexico or barrier, that nothing else meets all those definitions. You just can't say Pleasure Island. But that bill calls for casinos in I think Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, some of the larger cities, and it has. Oh, they're spending millions of dollars on lobby. They have over 50 lobbyists. I mean, they're working that bill. I don't think it's gonna make it. I don't think either one. Uh, we had a shot with either my bill or that bill, and one time, a few months back, when we thought we were going to be facing about $11 billion shortfall based on drops in the price of oil and gas, and in COVID, the loss of income from COVID-19, but it didn't materialize, and our shortfall is not nearly that much, so we're not in need of tax dollars and need of dollars that we thought we might be in. And so as a result of that, the gambling, it's the only time gambling is going to really ever have a chance of passing in Texas in our foreseeable future is if we need the money. If we need the money to keep operating the state, to keep operating public ed. But as long as we have dollars, as long as we're able to operate with current sources of revenue, the opposition to gambling is too strong by the religious right, and even we had people questioning gambling and talking down about gambling, and I don't know if it slipped or whatever. State representative from on Republican that he goes to Las Vegas and gambles all the time, but he want to allow you in Texas, if you have the right to vote on whether you can gamble or not. You say because gambling is bad for you. People don't know how to handle it, but I know how to handle it, so I can go to. I mean, it's that kind of attitude, and so he goes to his church or whatever and says, "I voted against gambling," and he wasn't there last Sunday because he was in Las Vegas. But
Yeah.
that's what we're up against—a lot of hypocrisy.
But James Broussard is asking about what about the school funding, and also when we're talking about school funding, and I've read something about someone has recommended teachers with a minimum salary of $70,000.
Yeah, those recommendations are great. I mean, but they have to be followed by actual appropriations of money. We can talk all we want and say that teachers should be paid like a professional, like a doctor, how important they are. All those things are true, but we don't have a legislature, unfortunately, that puts the value that they should put on public education and on teacher salaries and on these educators who have dedicated their life to our future and teaching our children. They don't get the recognition. They never have, and they aren't now getting the recognition. We can file all the bills we want to file and say they should make a minimum of $100,000 until that appropriations committee appropriates those dollars to the specific purpose. And that is when it makes a difference who's in control of the money, who's in control of the legislature. And right now, it's a significant control in the Republican Party hands, and they are not looking at those issues the way we look at those issues.
What about the school funding?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, school funding. I mean,
great.
it's just it's not going to change. All we were trying to hold the line, there are no cuts in the public education, and we're working on teacher retirement benefits. We're trying to keep the copay down. All those things are a constant battle up here in Austin.
Well, I have a question also. And when we talked about, we've gone through 1 year, almost 12 months of in this coronavirus pandemic. And I would hear the governor and the attorney general talks about the Texas representing Congress talk about the rainy day funds. How much
Mm.
billions of dollars in the rainy day fund?
Yeah,
Why
about
wasn't
12
that?
billion.
Yeah, why wasn't that used during this time? Because during the pandemic.
One, the governor doesn't have the authority to use it himself. He wouldn't call the legislature back. This is a big issue right now that we're having hearings on the emergency powers of the governor, and when they kick in and when the legislature can call itself back in. Because under current law, once the legislature adjourns in May, we don't come back for a year and a half unless there's a special session, and a special session can only be called by the governor. And when he calls it, you can only deal with issues that he says you can deal with. So there's a bill out there that we heard the other day in the same state affairs committee that's handling utilities that I'm on, that would one amendments that would give the legislature the authority to call itself back in session in case of times of emergency, and to make the types of appropriations you're talking about from the rainy day fund or for any where in the budget, move money around and do things like that. But right now, we don't have that authority, which we're working on getting that authority, because there's about $12 billion in the rainy day fund, and it's very hard to get the Republicans to use that money for anything. Last session, we used some in a flood control and a revolving account for water projects. And one of the impetus is that our bonding companies were saying, hey, you're going to affect the bonding negatively. You got too much money in the bank just sitting there, And so there is a possibility that we would take some of that money to hopefully help some of the cities who have exhausted all their revenue in overtime and things like that for during this COVID-19. And it is unsettled at this point, powers of the governor.
Yeah. But Joe, I've held you up enough. You give us a lot of water to drink.
No.
And I appreciate you accepting my invitation again, like you always do, without a problem. I just wanted to kind of
Anytime.
I just wanted to get an update because we hadn't talked in a while, and some of our viewership would like to know what's going on, what they can expect. So, anything lasting you'd like to share with us?
Well, in a few weeks, I'll be happy to come back. We'll have more things that have come to the floor.
Well, let's do
We will
that.
see what is developed in these voting rights bills, and then where we're going in redistricting. We'll know all that in a month from now. We'll have a much clearer picture. A lot of this stuff is up in the air right now, and hopefully some of my bills will be got to the Senate and back. So it's really a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things we're dealing with.
Well, thank you, Joe. And I'm gonna invite you back next month after you come from the
Certainly, I'd be glad to come back.
session, and share with us what we can expect from that.
Yes, sir.
Joe Deshotel, everybody, for our Texas State Representative, District 22, with us tonight, and we had back-to-back shows. So we've been at it all for the last 2 hours. So, Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I'll see you in about 60 days. We'll talk at it again, right?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, Joe.
Yes,
all
sir.
right, man. I appreciate you. God bless.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Knowledge is Power Podcast Live. Be sure to like and subscribe to all Knowledge is Power social media pages.